My husband's betrayal didn't begin with a text, a whisper, or a late night phone call. It began with an email, a cold, sterile document intended for his lawyer, accidentally forwarded to me. I was sitting at our kitchen island surrounded by brightly colored invitations for our daughter Lily's 6th birthday when the subject line, Divorce Petition and Bali Relocation, appeared on my screen. My breath hitched. The world outside our Denver home was bathed in the warm, golden light of a late November afternoon. But inside, I was plunged into a sudden suffocating darkness. My husband, Ethan, a man who built a successful biotech company on promises of innovation and integrity, had been building a new life for himself, a life that didn't include me or our daughter. He wasn't just leaving, he was erasing us. The email detailed his plans to move to a lavish penthouse in Bali with his new business partner, Lena, and had already siphoned our entire life savings into an offshore account. Our dream of a family and a future, a dream I had poured my heart and soul into, was a calculated deception, and I had just been given a front row seat to the full devastating performance. Before the email that shattered my world, our life in Denver felt like a canvas I had carefully painted. The masterpiece was a tranquil existence, filled with the simple, joyful chaos of a young family. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am a pediatrician, a profession I chose because of a deep-seated desire to heal and protect. The weight of that white coat was a responsibility I wore with pride, but after Lily was born, I found a new, more immediate calling. I shifted my career, trading the hectic pace of the hospital emergency room for a home based consultancy, allowing me to be present for every scraped knee, every feverish night, and every first day of school photo. It was a sacrifice I made willingly, fueled by the love I had for my daughter and the promise of a future I believed we were building together. My husband, Ethan, was the other half of this picture, a charismatic and ambitious CEO of a burgeoning biotech startup. He had a smile that could disarm anyone and a mind that was always a dozen steps ahead. We met at a medical technology conference, a whirlwind romance of late night conversations and handwritten notes slipped into my briefcase. He spoke of a life of purpose, of revolutionizing medicine, and of a love that would be our rock. He promised me a life of security, a future where we would never have to worry. I believed him completely and without question, a testament to how thoroughly he had charmed me. He was the visionary and I was the nurturer, a perfect complementary team. We moved into our beautiful home in Denver, a house with wide windows that framed the snow-capped Rockies and filled it with the sound of Lily's laughter. It was a life I was profoundly grateful for, a life I thought was an unbreakable bond between three people. But looking back, the cracks were there, subtle and easy to ignore, like fine lines in a marble statue. Ethan's work trips became longer, his late nights at the office more frequent. His phone, once left open on the counter, was now always locked and face down. I would ask him about our family finances, about the savings we were building for Lily's college fund or our dream of a new home, and he would dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry, honey, I've got it handled," he would say, his voice a smooth, confident balm that soothed all my anxieties. I trusted him. He was a CEO. He knew these things. When he proposed we sell our investment properties for a high-yield, low-risk venture, I didn't hesitate. I signed the documents, believing it was a step toward the future he had promised. Then there was his mother, Eleanor, a woman whose designer heels clicked with silent disapproval whenever she visited. She would cast her eyes over my work from home attire and my slightly too relaxed parenting style, sighing softly about my emotional fragility and how I was too soft with Lily. Ethan never defended me. His silence was a quiet but constant form of betrayal, a subtle reinforcement of her narrative. I never thought much of it then, dismissing it as the generational gap. I was a doctor, but I was also a wife and a mother, and I convinced myself that my intuition, the very tool I used to diagnose illness in my young patients, was overreacting. I was so busy protecting our daughter and nurturing our home, I failed to see that the life I was building was a mirage. Our beautiful family, our dreams, our promises, it was all a lie, a house built on sand, and the tide was about to turn. The world narrowed to the glowing screen of my laptop, the vibrant, celebratory images of Lily's birthday, invitations a grotesque mockery of the words I was reading. Divorce petition and Bali relocation. The phrase burned itself into my mind, a brand of betrayal. My hands, still sticky from helping Lily make her own confetti earlier, trembled so violently I had to grip the edge of the kitchen island. I wasn't just reading a breakup notice, I was reading the calculated, clinical summary of my life's demolition. The document, a PDF attachment in an email chain between Ethan and his lawyer, laid out the facts with a chilling detachment. Ethan was seeking an uncontested divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The second attachment was a detailed itinerary for his new life, a one-way ticket to Bali, a lease agreement for a luxurious penthouse, and a document naming Lena, his assistant, as his new business partner and co-owner of a consulting firm he was launching. My mind reeled. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This was a well-orchestrated, premeditated departure. He had spent months, perhaps years, building this new life while I was planning our future and making Lily's favorite banana pancakes. I stumbled to the home office, my heart pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I logged into our shared bank account, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. A simple click brought up our balance. My stomach lurched. The savings account, once holding the fruits of a decade of hard work and sacrifice, was empty. Every dollar, every cent we had put aside for a down payment, for Lily's college fund, for our supposed future, was gone. The only funds remaining were in our checking account, a meager few $100s, barely enough for groceries, and the electricity bill that was due in a week. I pulled up the transaction history, a series of large wire transfers to an unknown account in Switzerland. The dates on the transfers coincided precisely with the high-yield, low-risk venture Ethan had sold me on when he convinced me to sell our investment properties. The venture was a lie, the money was a weapon, and he had used it to gut me financially. But the financial betrayal was only the beginning. As I scrolled through the email chain, I found another attachment, a document labeled Custody Plan. My blood ran cold. The words blurred into a sick parody of legal jargon, but the meaning was brutally clear. Ethan and his mother, Eleanor, had been collecting my medical records from the period after Lily's birth, when I was struggling with postpartum depression. They intended to use my therapy sessions, my medications, my every vulnerable moment to paint me as an unstable and unfit mother. He wasn't just trying to leave me, he was trying to steal my daughter, the man who had held me on those dark, sleepless nights, who had promised me his unwavering support, was a predator, meticulously gathering ammunition. The concern in his eyes then hadn't been love, it had been calculation. He wasn't a partner, he was a spy in my own home. A memory flashed into my mind, sharp and painful. The day after a particularly difficult session with my therapist, Eleanor had called. "Sarah," she had said, her voice dripping with false concern, "I heard you're not doing so well, you know. You have to be strong for Lily. Christopher and I are worried you're too fragile for all this." At the time, I dismissed her words as simply a mother in law's clumsy attempt at comfort. Now I saw the truth. It was a carefully planted seed, a line to be repeated and later used as evidence of my instability. They had been building this case against me for years, brick by brick, lie by lie, while I was busy believing in the beautiful facade they had constructed. My phone rang, the unexpected jolt of the incoming call shattering the silence. It was Eleanor. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the screen, but then a cold rage surged through me. I answered. "Eleanor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know." Her response was not what I expected. "Sarah, you need to stop this. Christopher said you're threatening him unless he gives you money. You're trying to destroy his career." The accusation was so ludicrous, so transparently false, that it took my breath away. He wasn't just abandoning us. He was getting ahead of it, spinning a narrative where I was the greedy, vengeful ex-wife, the aggressor, the villain. "Don't play the victim," she snapped. "I've seen the texts. You're trying to keep Lily from him." I hung up, my hands shaken not from fear, but from the searing clarity that had just dawned on me. This was a war, and they had fired the first shots. I walked to Lily's room, where she was happily building a castle out of blocks. The sight of her innocent face, her bright, trusting eyes, solidified something hard and unyielding inside me. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could use my pain against me. They were wrong. The man I had loved was a phantom, and the woman who I thought was my family was an enemy. But they had underestimated one thing: the instinct of a mother to protect her child. They had given me a front row seat to their conspiracy, and now they would learn what happens when you give a doctor, a person trained to find the truth hidden beneath layers of symptoms, a reason to fight. I would not just survive this, I would dismantle them. The initial shock of the betrayal gave way to a cold, razor-sharp clarity. I was no longer Sarah, the trusting wife and devoted mother. I was a doctor in a crisis, a strategist meticulously assessing a life-threatening situation. My first step was not to scream, not to cry, but to secure my daughter. I called my parents in Fort Collins. Their voices were a lifeline, a calm port in the storm of my crumbling reality. "We're covering your rent and Lily's tuition for as long as you need," my mom said, her voice firm and unwavering. "You're not alone, Sarah. You just focus on fighting." Their support was the anchor I didn't know I needed, a temporary buffer that gave me the mental space to think, to plan, to become the person Ethan never saw coming. With Lily safely tucked into bed, her soft snores a stark contrast to the war raging inside me, I began my campaign. I knew Ethan would be clever. He wouldn't just vanish, he would cover his tracks. But he had one fatal flaw: he was predictable. His passwords were a variation of our anniversaries, Lily's birthday, and his old high school sports team. I went to the home office and opened our shared computer. My fingers, steady now, flew across the keyboard. I tried the old passwords on his cloud storage, and one by one, they worked. A flood of folders appeared on the screen, each one a digital breadcrumb trail of his deception. I found email exchanges with his lawyer, detailing his plan to use my postpartum depression against me. I found the forged documents he had used to sell our investment properties. Most damning of all, I found a spreadsheet labeled offshore assets. My stomach knotted. It wasn't just one account in Switzerland. There were multiple shell corporations and numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands, all set up with the help of his mother, Eleanor. They weren't just siphoning money, they were laundering it. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a pawn in a large-scale financial fraud. I photographed everything, every email, every transaction record, every document that proved their malicious intent. I realized I couldn't fight this alone. I needed a professional, a specialist in this kind of legal and financial malfeasance. My old college roommate, a corporate lawyer, recommended a formidable family law attorney in Denver named Hannah Reyes. Hannah's office was minimalist, her demeanor calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. I handed her the printouts of the emails, the bank statements, the custody plan, and the spreadsheet of offshore accounts. He took everything, I said, my voice barely a whisper, and he's trying to make me the unstable one. Hannah's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the documents. What he did is despicable, Sarah, but it's also a legal gold mine. He committed identity fraud to sell your properties, and he's trying to hide assets in foreign countries. Judges don't take kindly to that. She leaned forward, her voice a low, fierce whisper. We're going to file for an emergency hearing. We'll freeze every account we can find and get a temporary restraining order on his travel. He may be on a beach in Bali, but he'll be a prisoner of his own greed. From that moment on, I lived a double life. By day, I was the devoted mother, baking cookies with Lily and reading her bedtime stories. By night, I was a detective, poring over old bank statements, cross-referencing names, and searching for any weak link in Ethan's carefully constructed fortress of lies. I found a receipt for an expensive watch he had purchased for Lena, a gift he had charged to our shared credit card, listing it as a client appreciation expense. I found an old email from an accountant hinting at some unusual transfers and a follow-up email from Ethan telling him to keep his mouth shut. Every detail I uncovered was another nail in his coffin, another piece of evidence to prove that this was a long-term, calculated betrayal, not just a momentary lapse in judgment. The turning point came one night when I was searching through Ethan's personal computer. He had been so careless. He had left an unsent email in his drafts, addressed to a high-ranking executive at a rival biotech firm. The email contained a resume and a pitch for a new job, listing his new address in Bali. He hadn't just abandoned his family, he was planning to abandon his company as well. It was the final piece of the puzzle. He was a man who burned every bridge behind him, a coward who thought he could simply vanish and rebuild a new life, leaving the wreckage for us to clean up. I forwarded everything to Hannah, my fingers trembling not with fear, but with a growing sense of power. Ethan thought he had won. He thought he was free. He didn't know I was building a case that would not only bring him down, but also expose every lie he and his mother had woven. I kept my silence. I didn't send him a single angry text or make an emotional phone call. I let him believe I was broken, that I was a helpless victim who would crumble under the weight of his betrayal. But I wasn't broken. I was preparing. I was turning my pain into a weapon, a cold clinical instrument of justice. And for Lily, I would not rest until every single person who had conspired against us paid the price. My silence was my shield, my stillness a well-aimed weapon. For weeks, I had been the silent architect of my own justice, poring over documents and building a fortress of evidence. The day of the emergency hearing arrived with a cold, gray Denver morning. It was a day of reckoning, a day to replace the whispers of betrayal with the hard, unyielding voice of the law. I walked into the courthouse with Hannah, my lawyer, by my side. She was a silent pillar of strength, her presence a quiet promise that I was no longer alone in this fight. Across the room, I saw them, not Ethan, but his lawyer, a slick, overconfident man in a perfectly tailored suit, and to my surprise, Eleanor. Her face was a mask of disdain, her eyes flicking over my simple black dress and landing on me with a palpable disgust. She leaned over to Ethan's lawyer, whispering venomously. As soon as she saw me, she hissed, You should be ashamed. But Hannah, with a quiet efficiency, cut her off, warning that if she continued, she would be called as a witness for aiding her son in his abandonment of his family. The words were a warning shot, a clear message that we were not here to be intimidated. In the courtroom, Hannah was a force of nature. She presented our case with the precision of a surgeon. She started with the core of the matter, Ethan's email, the one meant for his lawyer, detailing his plans to leave. She then laid out the bank statements showing the complete siphoning of our savings, followed by the screenshots of the transaction records to the offshore accounts. The judge's face, impassive at first, began to tighten, but the most powerful piece of evidence was the custody plan document. Hannah detailed how Ethan had conspired with his mother to use my postpartum depression against me, to paint me as an unstable mother, all to gain leverage in a custody battle he had no intention of actually fighting. The document, which detailed their intent to use my vulnerable moments as ammunition, drew a sharp, disapproving glance from the judge. Ethan's lawyer tried to spin a different story to portray me as a greedy, emotional woman who was trying to extort money from a hardworking, successful man. He even presented a few doctored texts from Eleanor, trying to paint me as the one who was threatening to keep Lily from her father. But Hannah, with a quiet confidence, simply presented the full, unedited versions exposing the fabrications. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, my client is not an aggressor. She is a victim who has had her home, her finances, and her mental health weaponized against her. She is here today not for revenge, but for justice and for the protection of her daughter. The judge, a woman with a no nonsense demeanor, silenced Ethan's lawyer with a wave of her hand. I've seen enough, she said, her voice like steel. She granted our motions. Ethan's accounts were frozen. I was given temporary full custody of Lily, and Ethan was restricted to supervised visitation only. As we left the courthouse, Eleanor's glare followed me, but it was no longer a look of pure disdain. It was laced with a flicker of fear. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back and winning. The first blow had been struck, and the silence I had maintained had proven to be the most deafening weapon of all, but the battle was far from over. A few days later, my phone rang with an international number. It was Lena, Ethan's assistant. Her voice a sharp contrast to the composed professional I remembered. It was frayed, filled with a desperate anxiety. Sarah, we need to talk, she said. Ethan, he's fallen apart. I'm done with him. My heart remained an unmoving stone. Why should I care? I asked, my voice flat. He's hiding money from me too, she said. Another account in Liechtenstein, over $200,000. He booked a flight to Denver tomorrow and he's unhinged. I'm worried what he'll do. I stepped onto the balcony, the crisp Denver air a welcome sting on my face. This was a new layer of betrayal, a new crack in Ethan's carefully built facade. Lena wasn't loyal to me. She was a rat jumping off a sinking ship, seeking self-preservation. What do you want, Lena? I asked. Protection, she said, her voice trembling. If I give you everything, I need immunity. He'll come after me when he knows I talked. I consulted Hannah immediately. She drafted an immunity agreement for Lena in exchange for full documentation of Ethan's financial dealings and a sworn statement detailing their conspiracy. By evening, Lena sent bank statements showing the Liechtenstein account, plus a detailed confession of how Ethan and Eleanor had planned the entire charade for months. Lena's betrayal of Ethan was the final critical piece of the puzzle. I now had irrefutable proof of a sophisticated financial conspiracy. I wasn't just a betrayed wife with a stack of emails. I was a plaintiff with a mountain of criminal evidence. With Lena's evidence in hand, Hannah was able to secure an emergency restraining order just hours before Ethan's flight landed in Denver. Airport security detained him as he stepped off the plane, serving him with the order and a summons for the next day's hearing. He called me from the security office, his voice a venomous cocktail of rage and disbelief. "You got me fired, Sarah. My job in Bali, it's gone." I was stunned. I hadn't sent any email to his company. I checked my email and found a forwarded message, allegedly from me, with a fabricated email address. It contained distorted claims about Ethan's custody dispute and copies of my legal documents. My apartment had been untouched, which meant only one person could have done it: Eleanor. She had visited after Ethan's departure, ostensibly to support me, but I now realized she was rummaging through my files. This was her move to sabotage Ethan's job, ensuring he couldn't pay support and thus weakening my court order. The betrayal had cut both ways. Eleanor had undermined her own son, and now he was trapped. I forwarded him the email she had sent to his employer with all the original documents attached. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I'll call you back," he muttered, the rage in his voice replaced by a dawning terror. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a torrent of texts. It was Ethan forwarding me the message thread between him and his mother. It revealed her twisted plan to undermine me from the very start, pushing for custody by painting me as an unstable mother. His rage was no longer directed at me, it was directed at her. He finally saw her for what she was: a master manipulator who had used her own son to further her schemes. I sent everything to Hannah, who immediately filed for identity fraud charges against Eleanor. Her schemes were unraveling, and I was one step closer to justice. The final hearing was a reckoning. The courtroom was packed, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. Hannah presented the Liechtenstein account, the custody conspiracy, Lena's sworn statement, and Eleanor's identity fraud. Ethan's lawyer floundered, his defense crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The judge ordered a forensic accountant, which uncovered not just our 200,000 but additional funds Eleanor had hidden for Ethan. The courtroom felt electric, each ruling a brick in the wall I was building around Lily's future. Ethan's defiance faded, his eyes meeting mine with something that looked like regret. But I was done looking for the man I thought I knew. He was a ghost, a memory of a time that was never real. I was here for justice, not for a reunion. The judge's final ruling was a decisive victory. Not only was Ethan required to pay significant child support and alimony, but both he and Eleanor were to face civil penalties for their fraudulent activities. Eleanor's identity fraud charges would also be pursued criminally, her social standing in her community crumbling when her friends and colleagues learned of her actions. As the gavel struck, a sense of quiet triumph washed over me. The battle was over, and for the first time in a long time, I was free. I had not sought revenge out of spite, but for justice, and in the end, that justice was the sweetest victory of all. The gavel's final strike was not just the end of a legal battle, it was the beginning of my new life. In the months that followed the hearing, a quiet but profound justice settled over everything. The forensic accountant uncovered a deep web of financial fraud, exposing not just the money Ethan had hidden, but also the additional funds Eleanor had secretly squirreled away for him. The judge's final ruling hit them both hard. Ethan was ordered to pay significant child support and alimony, a financial burden he now had no steady income to meet. His reputation in Denver's tight knit biotech community was shattered, his abandonment of his family detailed in public court records. The man who had once promised to revolutionize medicine was now just a cautionary tale, a ghost of a CEO who had vanished and returned to face the consequences. Eleanor's punishment was even more public. The identity fraud charges against her moved forward, her carefully constructed social standing crumbling around her. Her friends, her colleagues, and her entire community learned of her malicious actions. The woman who had judged me for my emotional fragility was now a pariah, ostracized and alone. She tried to call me, her voice no longer condescending but desperate, begging me to drop the charges. I simply told her, I'm a doctor, I help people, but I don't give prescriptions to those who intentionally poison others. I hung up the phone and felt nothing. Her pain was not my victory. It was a consequence of her own choices. With the recovered funds, I was finally able to rebuild. I used a portion of the settlement to purchase a beautiful, spacious home in a quiet neighborhood just outside Denver with a large, sunny yard for Lily to play in. It wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary, a place where we could finally feel safe. I didn't want to live in the home where the betrayal had occurred, where every corner held a memory of a lie. This new home was a blank canvas, a fresh start for us to paint our own happiness. My professional life blossomed as well. I had spent so long as a home-based consultant, putting my career on the back burner. Now, with the financial security to pursue my dreams, I decided to open my own private pediatric clinic. The idea had been simmering in my mind for years, a dream I had been too afraid to pursue. I called it the Willow Clinic, named after the tree that bends without breaking, a symbol of resilience. The clinic was small but warm, filled with soft colors, gentle lighting, and toys in the waiting room. It was a place where children felt safe and where I could practice medicine the way I had always envisioned, with compassion, a listening ear, and a focus on both physical and mental well-being. The clinic wasn't just a business, it was a part of my healing journey. Every day I saw the beautiful innocence in the faces of my young patients, an innocence that had once been threatened in my own home. I was no longer just treating illnesses, I was building a community. I started a women's support group at the clinic, a weekly meeting for single mothers who were struggling with the same fears, the same anxieties, and the same feelings of isolation I had once known. We shared stories, we offered advice, and we laughed. It was a beautiful, unexpected legacy to come out of the wreckage of my marriage. Ethan tried to come back into our lives, of course. His supervised visits with Lily were brief and awkward. He would sit in a sterile room, his eyes filled with a hollow regret, trying to engage with a daughter who had all but forgotten him. He was a stranger to her, a man she saw once a month, a shadow in her memory. He made half-hearted attempts to apologize, his words empty and unconvincing. I made a mistake, Sarah, he'd say. We could fix this. But I knew better. He wasn't sorry for the betrayal. He was sorry for the consequences. I simply smiled, a polite, distant smile. You made a choice, Ethan, and now you have to live with it, just as I have to live with mine. He rarely used his visitation rights, and slowly he faded from Lily's life like a shadow, a memory she would one day have to grapple with, but a memory I was now strong enough to help her through. Lena, Ethan's former mistress, also found a way back into my life, though in a much different capacity. She reached out, her tone contrite and apologetic. She told me she was living in Bali, working as a virtual assistant, and trying to rebuild her life. She said she was grateful for the immunity agreement and that she had learned a profound lesson about integrity and loyalty. She asked if there was any way she could help me to atone for her part in the betrayal. I thought about it for a long time. She had been a tool in Ethan's plan, but she had also been the key to his downfall. I told her I didn't need her help, but I didn't hold any resentment. She was another victim of his manipulation, albeit one who had gone along with it for far too long. I simply wished her well and closed that chapter of my life forever. As Lily thrived in our new home, her laughter filling the rooms, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, her little hand in mine, she asked, "Mommy, will Daddy ever come back?" I paused, searching for the right words. I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to burden her with the pain of the past. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "But we're enough, you and me. We're a team." She smiled, a pure, innocent smile, and the knot in my chest, the one that had been there for months, finally loosened. Ethan's email, the one that said divorce petition and Bali relocation, was meant to break me. It was meant to be the end. But instead, it became my awakening. It sparked a fire in me, a strength I never knew I possessed, a fierce resolve forged in the crucible of betrayal and tempered by the pure, unconditional love I had for my daughter. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. I was a doctor. I was a mother. I was a builder. And I was finally free. I still have the email, the one that was meant to destroy me. It's not saved in some forgotten folder on my laptop. It's printed out, framed in a simple, elegant black frame, and placed on the corner of my desk at the Willow Clinic. It's not a monument to my pain, but a testament to my resilience. The words that were meant to be my end, divorce petition and Bali relocation, are now a reminder of my beginning. They remind me that the greatest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest versions of ourselves. They remind me that a foundation built on lies will always crumble, and that the only thing that truly matters is the foundation we build for ourselves with integrity, courage, and a fierce, unwavering love for our children. This journey taught me that a woman's power is not in her ability to endure pain in silence, but in her courage to turn that pain into a purpose. It's about more than just surviving. It's about thriving. It's about understanding that our worth is not tied to a man's validation or a shared bank account. It's about having a seat at the table, and if no one offers you one, building your own. My story, from a trusting wife to a single mother, from a heartbroken victim to a thriving clinic owner, is not unique. It is a story of a woman who found her voice and her strength in the face of what was meant to be her downfall. I used to think my purpose was to heal children's bodies. Now, I know my purpose is to help women heal their lives. My clinic, the Willow Clinic, is more than just a medical practice. It's a symbol of hope. It's a place where women, and especially mothers, can find not just medical care for their children, but also a community where they can feel seen and heard. The support group I started has grown into a powerful network of incredible women who lift each other up. We share our stories, we celebrate our victories, and we remind each other that a painful chapter does not define the entire book. We are not just rebuilding, we are reimagining what our lives can be, one day at a time. I am a doctor, a mother, and a survivor. I am living proof that you can lose everything and still come back stronger, wiser, and more powerful than you ever thought possible. The email was a closing chapter on a life that wasn't meant for me. The frame on my desk is a bookend, a reminder that the sweetest revenge is not in watching your enemies fall, but in building a beautiful, fulfilling life that they can never touch. My legacy won't be that I was a betrayed wife. It will be that I became a beacon of light for others, a testament to the fact that women have the power to create their own happiness, their own success, and their own justice. Thank you for listening to my story. What was the moment you realized you had to fight for yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and new beginnings.